Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server. That's where you wanted to be last night after one of the most embarrassing losses in Heat playoff history, actually in anybody's playoff history. That's where everybody was venting about it. Go there for $2.99 per month. You can cancel at any time. The link is in the description, and you'll bypass the Apple upcharge. Access to 10 different channels. I'm going to keep mentioning this all off season. We got a transactions channel. We got a draft channel. You're going to want to be on those. So check it out. It's Off the Floor. That's the Discord server. Get out of the mess of Twitter. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. The Heat are done, but Prize Picks keeps going. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down your $5. Get $50 to play right away. Prize Picks, the official fantasy sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, is daily fantasy simplified. You can play up to 6 players together across the sports spectrum. And, of course, you can play on the NBA. So go to prizepicks.com. Use the code F-I-V-E. Got to get something out of this season. Get your $50. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs, down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on 5 Reasons Sports. I got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Greg Sylvander. The Miami Heat season is over, 37-45, 2 play-in wins, 4 playoff losses. So if you want to total it up, what is that? 39-49 on the season. And it concluded with as big a thud as you can possibly imagine. And I think we kind of knew it was headed there. It felt that way this season. Felt like, I hate to say it, an appropriate way for the season to end. And Greg, we never got to this episode. Again, you can follow him at Greg Sylvander. We never got to this episode prior to the last game, but we were going to go through the sweeps in Heat history. Mm-hmm. And when it ends for them in this franchise, particularly at home, it's definitive. You look at the loss to Charlotte in, the 2001 playoffs, 3-game sweep where Riley came afterwards and said, we're absolutely embarrassed. You look at the Milwaukee sweep. That one was at home, right? They lost that one in 4 games.
Oh, that was in 5. That
was in 5. I'm sorry, but they still ended with a pretty bad.
Chicago.
The Chicago one in 07.
Yeah.
Where Riley clapped them off the floor. A lot of them had won championships, but didn't show any effort in the 06-07 season. And Luol Deng. That's what Mike Biamani. By the way, I felt so sorry for Mike Biamani last night. Man, I wouldn't want that job. Like Eric Reed and John Crotty had it tough. I was listening to some of the broadcasts as I walked back into the media room. But Biamani had to put a spin on that thing, to a certain degree. That's the Heat PA announcer. Thank you, Heat Nation. That was tough. I mean, Uptown Dale, everybody. It was rough last night to be in that building. And people started to leave about 3 minutes left on the fourth, or a lot of folks started to leave. I don't blame them for it. A lot stayed till the end. There was some booing, but not to the level that I quite expected. But this is what happens when you have a team that just, again, doesn't have enough. And eventually, when you have a talent deficiency that in a series that is then combined with, what are we really doing here? Like an effort thing. And that's what Kenny Smith spoke about. Their first few possessions were so bad. And it's after that, I was like, okay, this is done. So it was rough all around. And I said it is probably the appropriate way for this to end, because it leaves no ambiguity here. There's nothing that Spo could say about how we fought and all that. People asked him questions about, the courage that the team showed in the play-in, and I'm like, okay, I mean, not for today. You know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of where it is. And I think what we're going to talk about today is, before we get to the exit interviews and everything else that's going to be happening over the next couple of days, we don't have an announcement on that yet. Today's Tuesday. I'm expecting Wednesday for that. They usually like to get that over with as soon as possible. The players will be asked if they want to speak to the media. Some probably won't. I won't be surprised if many don't. Bam probably will, because he's the captain. Tyler tends to speak in these situations. I think he skipped it last year. Jimmy used to skip it all the time, but then we're going to have Riley eventually, I think. I don't know necessarily that it's the best idea, because things have come out of those press conferences in recent years that have kind of made things worse, but I do anticipate that he will speak to the media, because somebody has to take some kind of responsibility for the way that things played out. And he's still the face of the franchise, even if he's not the final decision maker at all times and not quite as involved as he used to be. He's the one that people point to. Stephen A. Smith was on today saying that Riley needs to step down. I don't think Stephen A. really knows that the Heat's organizational depth chart and how things work at this point, but he's the face. And so he's going to have to face it eventually and going to have to explain this. And my guess is that's probably Friday or Monday. But anyway, to get to it, it got me thinking, Greg, and I want your thoughts on this. Was this the worst season they've had since Pat took over? And I don't mean by one loss record, but I just mean the way things played out, the shots that are taken at the way that the organization operates now, sort of the mocking of Heat culture. Like, are we being too much prisoner of the moment with the frustrations that we had covering the series, season, all of it, to say that a season when you were 37-45 and did make the playoffs was the worst season of the Riley tenure? Is that when you had a 15-win season in 07-08? Is that going too far?
It's funny. I'm glad we're doing this show after the loss, the 55-point loss, mind you, on their home floor. Largest deficit in a series ever between two teams. I mean, they were completely outclassed, and it did make some things apparent. But to your point about the larger question here, like I've been through all of them, right? Like we talk about they got swept by Chicago. They got swept by Chicago twice. The first time was all the way back in 95, 96 when they first traded for Zoe. And that felt like you were building on to something. The one to Charlotte that you mentioned felt like the end of an era for a group to a degree, and they had lean years after that. And then obviously the one to Chicago later on in 07 or so was a precursor to what turned into, breaking up that team in a 15-win season and all that. So the part of it that sticks to me here this year and why it's like worse is that it feels a little bit more like everyone was a little blindsided maybe when they shouldn't have been. And that there were some, even Spoelstra yesterday after the game said we were irrational in that we thought we could compete in this series. He said something to that. I think like that mindset is difficult to, when you see what played out and the way that the Jimmy situation went and the way that even if you just go back to the year that they had PJ and Kyle Lowry and they went to the conference finals, they were the 1 seed. They didn't really supplement that roster. And you just think of all the things that played out. And then the way that this year was the exclamation point on that era. It's tough. And now, to your point, they're not getting the benefit of the doubt that they've always gotten. People want them to update the resume and make it look, or at least bring it a little bit more to the present moment than just looking backwards. And so fans, before last night's game, they had the rally towels and fans were immediately making jokes, which I went and did my own joke on Discord, that like they're throwing in the towel. It was there's so much apathy between the fan base, I felt like, and by the end of this season, this team, and that's just, it's a crappy moment. I think to your point too, Like, there doesn't seem to be a direction in place at this exact moment that everybody can clearly point to. When you had a 25-year-old Dwayne Wade, you kind of knew that that was going to figure itself out in the long run. This is different. And so it's close. It's in the running for worst seasons ever. I don't want to just necessarily put it there because, that might be a little prisoner of the moment. They were in the playoffs, but they had no business being in the playoffs. And I think that the way that they lost was probably good for everyone, so that there's no question that they are there's a gap between them and the top of the Eastern Conference, and there's no competitive advantage that they could gain or something that you can't measure on a stat sheet that they will be able to, in good conscience, look at and say, we can compete with those teams. So, I mean, if anything, that became clear, but it was a rough season. And I think the fans reflected that. I know that there's a loud minority on social, but but it started to spread even beyond those on social media by the end of this thing when they're losing by 55 in Game 4.
Yeah, I felt it in the arena last night. I mean, there were a couple of ushers who I know who were saying to fans as they were leaving it, "Oh, you had enough?" And that kind of encapsulates it. I think what you hit on is what I think the fans want to see is based off of Spoelstra's comment, where he says we were irrational about this. And I think what at least the loud minority on social media wants to see is the Heat to not be irrational about themselves this offseason. I think that's really it. I think this belief that their culture can overcome anything, that they can, again, compete just because they say they will, that loud minority on social media doesn't want to hear that anymore. They want talent. And I think we look at the Cleveland situation. These franchises, at least is where they were in their trajectory with talent, were not that far apart that long ago. Well, first thing, the Heat were in the finals, 2 postseasons ago. I guess it'd be 3 now. And Cleveland was bounced in the playoffs last year, right? I mean, I know they had injuries and everything else, but they made the Donovan Mitchell move, and they still didn't really progress that far beyond Miami. And you could make an argument that if Jimmy had been healthy last year and not had what happened in the play-in or whatever, I know against Boston would have been really difficult anyway, but you could make the case that the franchises were kind of on level last season. And then now look at this. Like it looks like they don't even belong on the same court. And I think that is where fans are going to be those who care. And you're right, there are some that are apathetic. I know they've sold a good number of their season tickets for last year, so that for next year, so like there will be seats sold. That's not the issue, but people showing up and people being engaged in the team, they are going to have to see a direction, and they're going to have to see more talent. And I just think that's where we're at. And if they are going to make a decision, okay, we're just pivoting young, okay, that's what we're doing. All right, well, then let's brand it that way, okay? Let's brand it that way. We're going to build with these kids. They're going to learn from their mistakes and all that kind of stuff. But branding it as Heat culture or anything else along those lines, when you lose by 55 at home and you don't even compete, and again, you look like Washington, Generals against the Globetrotters, like you can't do that now. And I think they know that. And they knew they were not contenders this year, even with Jimmy. That was said before the season. I'm not sure that Tyler giving voice to it at the All-Star game or saying that he needed Jimmy before Game 3 and all that was
before he went 1 of 10.
Right, went 1 of 10, and now obviously there's going to be a swirl on him, and it puts a damper on what was otherwise a very good season for him. I'm not sure that that's ideal, but I do think there needs to be at least something around that direction in terms of the way that this is framed. That, okay, we know we're not at the heights right now, but we have a plan to get back there. And I think as we get into, whenever it is Riley speaks, you and I typically do, and we will again, the podcast on what is he going to be asked and what is he going to say. I think we hit on everything last year, although I didn't think he was necessarily going to call out Jimmy quite the way he did. But the Tyler thing, a lot of this stuff we predicted, actually, and we'll do it again. But I think there has to be a recognition that some of what they've done is not working at this moment.
That's
it's
a
worked,
big one.
right? Has to be. It's worked. Okay. It's worked. Like when we have to go through worst seasons in history and you are actually considering a 37-45 season where they made the playoffs, then you know that the franchise has had success for 30 years. Okay. If we're doing that, because trust me, you want to go to Sacramento and you have a whole bunch of seasons to choose from. Okay.
Charlotte would kill for the season the Heat just had.
Correct. Okay. So I think we need to be fair in that regard. All right. But there has to be some acknowledgement that it may have worked in the past, but what we've done lately in terms of the way the Jimmy situation was managed, maybe it was unmanageable, but maybe you had to foresee that to a certain degree. And then again, some of the players that have been brought in, some of the players that have been honestly drafted, Jaquez was highly disappointing this year. The Rozier trade, I mean, they know that was a mistake. They can't flat out say it publicly. I mean, you can't say that about a current player. Yeah, this was a total disaster. We gave up a first-round pick for a guy who couldn't get off the floor even before he got hurt. And if he'd played, it probably would have been worse. You can't say that, but I think that you have to acknowledge that, yeah, we've made mistakes. And they know they've made mistakes, but I think that the fans want to hear that. We've made mistakes. Just say it. We've made mistakes, okay?
The widespread regression. I think also it's fair to say everyone that this is one of the rare moments that the players, the front office, and the coaching staff, including Eric Spoelstra, all have a ton to look at within. You know what I mean? Like, usually I feel like Spoelstra gets a pass and he's coached these guys to the max. He didn't have a great season. And I think so. This is another rare moment where I think the fans also want them to be some degree of honest and take accountability from all levels. And so that it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate that, because you talk about this plan of how they build it back and whether that's going young. It also could be quick moves to try to fix this thing fast. We've seen them try to do that. I think obviously you can't be prescriptive in a press conference of what's going to happen in the offseason, but the fans just want to know that this stat quo, what they're doing now, is acknowledged as not working, because that would obviously, by virtue of saying that, probably inherently mean moves and changes are coming. And I think that's just where most fans are.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And at the same time, there has to be some balance where you don't want to make a move just to make a move, and then you make the wrong move, and like the Rozier move. But we will go through their cap sheet, pretty carefully. Okay. And we'll address it on the pod. We always do this thing where it's like asset, neutral, negative, right? And we're going to do that again. And I will say there's a little bit more tilt towards the asset area, I think, this offseason than there was. But I also think that there are some that we thought would be assets that are not. Like, for instance, and again, I want to save this for a pod, but like Duncan's more of an asset now because it's a partial guarantee in the last year of his contract. And Rozier, last year of his contract. But also Jaquez is not the asset that he was before. I don't know if Jovic is because of the inconsistent availability. So there's a little bit of back and forth. And then Tyler, we're looking for an extension. I don't know where we put that one. Wiggins.
Hell no.
Right? No, Wiggins does not seem like an asset at this point. I said neutral contract when they acquired him. We talked about Davion and how they do need to retain him. I think most fans are, I actually think Davion gave better effort than anybody else in that particular series. Obviously, it didn't go well for anybody in Game 4, but to me, he's a must sign. But then, okay, like, then what else are you doing here?
Yeah.
And then obviously where asset, but we saw last night like how far away he is from actually contributing to big time.
Doesn't trust him.
Doesn't trust him. Had to pull him off the floor at the very beginning of the game, and that is predictable for a rookie. Like he played more and better at times than I think we expected, but ultimately, in the end, rookie with a lot to learn and a lot of muscle to put on his body and all of that kind of stuff. So
can they skew young, Ethan? Yeah. Can they skew young if Spoelstra has shown an unwillingness to really ever lean on young players?
It's tough. I mean, that's why I want, on the other side of this, I want to get into, we'll do this quickly, but I want to get into some of their other worst season candidates, because there is something instructive about where they went from there and kind of what they need. And we'll do another full episode about their overall, again, cap and tax position, because it does remind me to a certain degree of 2019, where Zach Lowe, who's one of the best at what he does, said they had the bleakest outlook in the league, and then they got Jimmy Butler and they drafted Hero, and it wasn't so bleak anymore, and they were in the finals. So I'm again resistant to just blanket statements, except for this, and I said this on Twitter, and we'll do this in another episode. See, I'm trying to chalk up episodes to get us through. We're probably gonna have Sedano join us in the next couple of days too to go through this, but it's to me, everything on the personnel side needs to be on the table at this point. You and I don't necessarily agree about one, so I'll save it. But I think when you have a season like this that ends like it did, with Pat's arms folded and Zoe looking like he wants to be anywhere else but there, we watched them the whole game. Like, everything is on the table. Like, that's a performance like that. That's my view on it. But I know we have a specific disagreement about Bam in that regard. But we'll get into that another podcast.
I understand why he could be on the table. I just think he's part of the solution moving forward, not part of the problem.
He could be, but I think this idea that anybody, especially someone making that kind of money, even if he is the anchor to what they do defensively, and the bottom may fall out. Well, I mean, I hate to tell you, the bottom fell out, okay? Mm-hmm. I mean, they gave up 127 points per game in the series, and
it's hard to argue it.
I mean, Cleveland's offensive rating in the series broke records. Like, I think at that stage you have to say, okay, if you're not going to change the coach, which you're not, if you're not changing major pieces to the front office, then I think that you have to look at, okay, everybody who plays and everybody who's an assistant coach, to be honest. I think there's a need, and I'll do this another episode. I think there's a need for a fresh voice there. I do. This idea of just bringing in Heat lifers is great, and I have great respect for all of them individually. But I do think there is some groupthink that has developed here.
Echo chamber.
Yeah. And I think at this point, maybe bringing in somebody who just F's things up, okay? Just, we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to get out of the box and make Spo get that way, maybe a little bit better. I think that, sometimes you don't, what is it? I forgot this president doesn't have it. I don't want to get into it, but like a cabinet of, what's it called? Like a opponent, yes, something like, yeah, well, you don't want too many yes men, right? You don't want somebody who just rubber stamps everything. And I feel like at this point, to have one voice in there at least, okay, who is like, okay, let's try this.
Mm-hmm. Think differently.
Everything should be on the table. They're not going to change that coach. I'm not asking them to, okay, but everything else should be on the table. That's how. This is not the question to be asked of Pat in the presser. Again, I'm giving away too much here, but the question that should be asked of Pat in the presser is simply this. Okay, I know people want us to stomp our feet and all that. We're afraid of losing.
Hold him accountable.
Crenshaw, yeah, but what are we supposed? I don't. We're until you trade for somebody, we're not leaving this room.
It's like, have you stood next to Pat ever in your life?
Not gonna. It's just not gonna. Okay, but here's a question that's reasonable to be asked of Pat. Like, by your standards, this was not a successful season.
Yep.
By your standards, by the standards that you have set for
the last
organization.
Few years.
Right. This is
eighth seed playing fodder. Come on.
Right. This was not a successful, enjoyable season. What is your plan to change it? That's a reasonable question that should get a decent answer. And I hope that he has something to say about that. It's not like you effed up the Jimmy trade, to take your lashes. Like, our fans want us to do that. That's like, if you pound of flesh, like what's the first thing? He doesn't care what we think. Second thing, okay, it's not going to get him to do anything. Okay. And third thing, he doesn't even have final say. Okay. Which people don't even realize. Anyway, let's get to, the other side of this. I do want to mention this is the appropriate sponsor. I told you to switch to this one. Do you have a leak? Do you have a mess? Water Cleanup of Florida. You can find them at WCUFL.com, your one-stop water and mold cleanup shop. From the preventative maintenance, the leak detection, to the damage assessment. They handle everything, every single step of the way. Again, Water Cleanup of Florida, based in Boca Raton, more than 200 five-star reviews on Google. They service the entire Tri-County area. They are your place to go. Michael Roberts' team, they're honest. You can't find honest contractors. Not everywhere. Okay, it's not that easy, particularly in Boca Raton. These folks are honest. I mean, I grew up there. Check it out. It's Water Cleanup of Florida, WCUFL.com. I always say this. if you've got the schmutz,
they got the guts. They definitely got the guts. We don't know about anybody else in this situation regarding this team, but Water Cleanable Florida has the guts.
We should ask Michael Robert and the team we'll bring them on to do an assessment of
Post-mortem.
Assessment of the roster and how we're going to clean up. All right, let's go through some of their worst prior seasons, because I know I'm going to get a call on this. Hey, you're going to say a 37-45 season is the worst season in history. I'm not saying it's their worst, okay? I'm just saying
it's in the running.
It's in the running. It's in the running. In terms of frustrations and, again, the assailing of the culture.
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember a time, and a lot of them are wrong and they don't know how the organization works, but I can't remember a time how there's been so many people like just taking shots at the top of the organization here and saying that they're tone deaf, or they're past their prime, or they're asleep, or they're this. I mean, this is what's out there. We're acknowledging what's out there. Again, I'm not saying it's from every fan who goes to the arena. It's not. But this is the echo chamber that gets sent back to us. Okay. And so that is kind of where fans are at. And the Jimmy thing exposed a lot of it. Although I know a lot are upset at me about this. I took their side on the majority of it.
I still think it was the right thing to not pay him.
I agree.
Even as I watch him get his joy back last night in Golden State, and it's painful as the Heat lose by 55. Like the poetic justice of that on Jimmy's side is hard to swallow for Heat fans. But I don't think the Heat should have paid Jimmy. I think they made the right move. I think they need to probably start thinking about things with that level of shrewd business. That probably needs to be amplified as much as that could be uncomfortable.
I agree. Look, here's the thing. We don't know that they would have been the 8th seed if Jimmy had behaved and stayed, right? I don't think they would have been much higher. I've mentioned that. I think if you look at the Eastern Conference this year, maybe 5th seed, maybe. Once things started to go bad, if they had to keep him around, the best they were going to do was the 8th seed, the best. So do you think that the Jimmy Butler that we saw with this roster would have done any better than losing in 6 to Cleveland? Because I don't.
One-legged threes?
Yeah, I mean, well, even if it wasn't the one-legged threes, but even if it was just Jimmy, like sort of one game he's on and one game he's off and all this. And look, Steph has covered it in Golden State. And I give Jimmy credit for his basketball IQ. And that system is very good for him. It's read and react. And that plays right into the way he plays. It was a perfect fit for him, honestly, and to play with Steph. But do I really think that this team with Jimmy was a contender? No. And I said that before the season. So if it wasn't a contender, then you take your lumps. The problem was the Heat's pick situation, independent of the Jimmy trade, but their own pick, which, made it de-incentivized losing because of the unprotected picks you're going to give up in the future. So I know Heat fans are frustrated they don't have their own pick and what it would have been 15th, but that's really the issue here is previous stuff, which, by the way, that OKC pick they had to give away is because they got Jimmy Butler in the first place. So that plays into it. And then you're looking at the Rozier trade and, what played into that, which we've acknowledged as a mistake, but that's really what played into this. Otherwise, look, they were going to be a first round out, I think, under any circumstances, with Jimmy or without Jimmy. It was just how painful it was to get there. And if that's the case, then no, you're not paying that man $120 million over 2 years. Like, I'm still with that. Like, for Golden State, they can justify it if they get far enough, right? And it was this is Steph's last run. Okay, maybe not this season, but this period of time. And Steph is still playing at such a high level, you owe it to him. So I always said Golden State makes sense for him. Golden State makes sense to go get him. Where they are in their timeline with Curry and Draymond, Jimmy makes sense. Where the Heat were in their timeline, the Jimmy window was missed. Okay, it was they got to 2 finals. Most franchises wouldn't even accomplish that, but the reality is it was over. Okay, so I don't have a problem with them moving off of him. People say they could have traded him before the season. I know the offers were not what people think they were. Okay, or what Bernie put out there. None of that was really true. So I don't know what they could have gotten before the season. We'll never know what they could have gotten if they were really aggressively shopping him. But Heat fans would have revolted at that point if they'd done it. So I think there's some criticism for them. But I also think this was just the nature of a malcontent player aging out of their process at this point. And so I don't have an issue with him not being here anymore or succeeding in Golden State. He's a good player. We always said that. When he's motivated, he can be great. Okay, maybe not all the time, but he's where they are at this point. He's not a player you could have counted on, no matter how Pat wanted to frame it, for 70 games to lead your franchise, set an example, be there every night, and make sure you get out of the play-in. He was not going to do that for him. So, certain point, like I look at this and I'm like, okay, this was really a sacrificial lamb season in all ways because of where they were with Jimmy. Mm-hmm. It just was uglier than it had to be, and he caused a lot of that. And they tried to make the best of it. They got Davion back in a trade. Wiggins, I said I was okay with at the time. They did get the 20th pick in the draft. Kyle Anderson was productive for them at times when they got him. They made the best of a bad situation. But I think it's overall fans want to see, okay, what's next now? Like, what is the plan next? Like, an acknowledgement that this is not acceptable. I think that's where it's at.
And then if we look back, like at the moments that they got swept, when they got swept by Charlotte, this was way back. It's probably so far back that fans don't want to talk about it. So I'll go quickly with it. When Mashburn and PJ knocked you out of the playoffs on your home floor, they brought in a bunch of kind of 1-year veterans like Kendall Gill, Rod Strickland, players like that were just trying to like get the last push out of their careers. They were a 36-win team, and it was the precursor to an even worse season that then got them Caron Butler in the lottery. So that's what happened after they got swept in the early 2000s. They get swept in 2007 after the playoff runs, and that was followed up by a season where I think they tried to get Ricky Davis to save something. Shaq obviously leaves eventually. Wade gets injured. They go down the 15-win season route, and then they have to kind of build that back up. And I think that they had the benefit of Dwayne coming back and playing the best basketball of his life after he had that brief hiatus there that was able to get them back in the middle of the pack to the point where then they could get the decks clear for 2010. I think that when I look back at those two timelines and I think about the Heat this year, their 37-win team, that Rod Strickland, Kendall Gill team was a 36-win team. It's hard to see, like, is this going to be a moment where they have a couple lean years? Because that's what's happened when they've been swept in other situations. Or is this going to be a situation where with $60 million in expiring contracts, we used to tout expiring contracts in Miami as the primary vehicle to get the player who wanted to say he wanted to come to Miami. You needed expirings and you needed draft picks. Well, they got $60 million in expirings. Are they going to just let those expire, reset their repeater tax on cap, and be conservative in their spending and kind of accept the fact that they own their 2026 pick and they can now, if they're bad, just take that pick where it comes? Or are they going to try to fast track this and use that $60 million and try to flip this and make this a better team in a faster way? And I think that's the biggest question that fans will have. But if we look at the old sweeps, Ethan, it doesn't generally mean that they're going to quickly be good again if we just take them at face value.
Well, let's go through them again, as you have, but I'll continue to. And I think you mentioned about, are you going to take an expiring contract? You and I both advocated for them to move Lowry's expiring contract, and they did with a first-round pick and got Rozier. Yeah. And
so see, it's not always the right move to your point.
It isn't. If you unravel it back from there, imagine if they hadn't made that trade. Just imagine if they had let Kyle's money expire. We should do a deep dive on this also. Like, if they had just let it expire and didn't give up the first-round pick, and then they had another first-round asset to play with.
And your mid-level to spend.
And the middle-level spend. And they also may not have been as concerned about losing if they hadn't given up the 27 pick, which became would have become the 28 pick, right? You're not as worried about that being unprotected because you weren't giving it up, right? So then maybe that changes the way that you handle the end of the season. I think if you look at their previous situations, and I think, again, this plays into why there's some fan frustration, even though I don't think their asset situation is as bad, like you just mentioned.
Agree.
As many are saying, is that, okay, if you go back to previous disappointing years, right? They kept losing to the Knicks in the late 90s. But everybody knew that they were going to run that back with moderate changes, right? And basically what they kept doing was flipping the backup point guard. I mean, literally, it was a different time, but that's basically what they did. I mean, the first year they got Timmy during the season, and they had gotten Zoe at the very beginning of the season, and they were trying to figure out kind of what kind of roster they had and all the rest of it. So they go into the next offseason, and I'm talking about this would be 96, I guess.
Yeah.
So they go into 90. Right. They try to get Juwan Howard. The league takes him away. They pivot. They get Marley. They were already, I believe, going to get PJ Brown. They made a run at Peyton. They didn't get Peyton, so they re-signed Hardaway. So that then became their team. Okay. And then from there, they had a different backup point guard. This is how little change they made. They had a different backup point guard. Oh, and they got Mash, obviously, and that was enough that season. Right. Well, they had a different backup point guard every year.
I liked all of those backup point guards.
I did too. It was Porter. That was probably the best one, the best team. But Porter, I'm sorry, Crotty. Porter, Crotty, Anthony Carter was the last one, and Murdoch. Right? Okay, so that's basically what they did. They go into 2000. They knew when they walked off the floor in 2000, if the Knicks beat them, that like, okay, we need to make changes. They knew that. Okay, they tried. They tried to get McGrady. They tried to get Grant Hill. They didn't get either, but Pat got Eddie Jones. He got Brian Grant. He got Anthony Mason. They put a team together around Zoe. Zoe got sick. All right. That then led to a season in 2000, 2001 that was better than expected without Zoe. They won 50 games. They went 8-5 with Zoe when he came back. But then, like we talked about earlier, they got swept off the floor by Charlotte. Right. So after that, the 2001 season, that was, you look at 2001, 2002, that's what you were talking about, where they brought in all these these
1-year deals, though. To your
1-year deals, short deals. Kendall Gill, Travis Best, Cedric Ceballos, Jimmy Jackson, all those guys, right? Okay. Then they decide to pivot to go young in 2002. Again, the Zoe era is over. So they pivot to go young in 2002 with the Karan pick. And it didn't take, they don't go through deep valleys. Okay. So they had a valley in 2001, 2002, 2002, 2003. Then they draft Dwayne. They start 0-7. People are calling them the worst team in NBA history. And behind Stan, behind Dwayne, behind Karan, behind Lamar, behind Brian Grant, they turn the thing around quickly and they make themselves into a second-round playoff team, and that sets the stage for Shaq, right? Then you go through the Shaq era. This is why I'm saying there does need to be some gratefulness on this, that these down periods don't last too long. Heat fans are going to flip out on me for saying that, but I mean, come on. I mean, this isn't Charlotte or Sacramento, as you've said. So then you go through this, okay, and then you win a championship, and we get to the Eastern Conference Finals, then you win a championship the next year, and then, like you mentioned, 06, 07, they get swept off the floor. They try to bring the thing back in 07, 08. It's not working early in the year. Then everybody gets hurt, okay? That led to the 15-win season, which I guess by record, yes, that was the most miserable season. But then Dwayne gets healthy, basically is what happened. Spo took over as coach. Dwayne got healthy. They draft Beasley and Chalmers, and then they're back on kind of a moderate upswing, and then the big three comes in. So I think even if you go back to all of that, they don't stay that long in these pockets. I think the pocket that Heat fans don't want them to be in is that period of time, not LeBron leaving, because they pivoted pretty quickly there to get Dragic. Okay. It's the after the 16-17 season, which was the surprise that they ended up going 30-11 and turning that thing around. It was after that where really the only thing they had to sell for until Jimmy came in, and it didn't last that long, but was mediocrity plus Dwayne's return. Okay. Yeah. But even that didn't last that long.
And Dwayne's return wasn't planned. So they were kind of going to have to go at it with the 4-year deals. Heat fans don't want to see guys they don't want to see them lock themselves into a mediocre roster, a middle of the pack roster. Mm-hmm. So I think that the more that they keep flexibility open, and people are starting to hate that word as Heat fans too, because they think it's an excuse to push off things. But I think that that's part of it, is that you don't want to see them locked into a team that has a bona fide ceiling.
Well, you're right. And I think as we sort of close this up, I think the overall point is, their valleys don't last too long. But when they have tried to kind of, fast track it sometimes, like the Rozier trade a couple years ago, whatever. It has backfired, or when they sort of overvalue their own, like that, and that's kind of what happened with after the 16-17 team, and of course 16 you overpaid Tyler Johnson, and then you overpay Whiteside, you overpay, all that kind of stuff that happened in there, and Dion and JJ, etc. I'm talking about James Johnson, not James Jones. So I think what you don't want is them to look at this and say, okay, we're gonna sort of lock ourselves into a slightly better than average core. The better plan is to step back some, I think. All right. Evaluate which of your young players you can go with. I just think that most Heat fans who say they want that won't like it as it's happening. And that's right?
There's only a certain brand of Heat fan sicko that can go through the 15-win seasons and watch all the games as Kasib Powell and Chris Quinn are balling out there for you. I'm one of them, but there's not a ton of them. We'll see if there's more of them out there than we expect maybe next year.
Yeah, and I think it shows the conundrum here, which is that as we head into the offseason, they have some space potentially to work with. They have some young players of varying value, okay, around the league or inside the organization. They have a Tyler decision they have to make on an extension. They have Bam signed to an extension. They have a lot of pieces there. There are a lot of directions they can still go. And we maybe look back at this last season and even that last game as a blessing in the sense of, okay, it forced them to get out of the Jimmy business here and sort of get on to something else. But again, our evaluation is going to be based on, okay, what moves do they make and what direction are they going in? Is it clear? And again, I'll say this, does the person who speaks, whether it's Pat or whoever else, acknowledge this was not fun? This was not good enough. This is not acceptable. It's on the players, but it's also on us. And it's on the coaching staff. And it's on everybody. Because as you mentioned, if you're going to be a development organization, the players have to develop. And this year they did not. They did not. Pretty much everybody went backwards. Okay. Yeah. And that's not that, except Tyler, I guess. Okay. Other than that, it's very hard to point at Davion once he got here.
And Tyler didn't end as a playoff riser, as we talk about. So,
well, that's the other thing. So there's just a lot of things that play here, and I know we covered a lot in this episode. And my overall thought, as we're going to get into all these things more individually, my overall thought is that was this the worst Heat season of all time? No. Was it the one that shook you the most about their foundation of the ones I've covered?
Yes.
It's up there. It's up there. I think they have to show, look, it doesn't look great right now, but we have a plan. We got a plan. We're going to get us out of here. Okay. And they got to make the fan base, who cares about us? They got to make the fan base believe it. I think that's where we're at right now. Cause that shit, I will tell you, like that was Brady, Alex, and I all took walks. We literally all it was like unwatchable. It's like you're watching a movie scene where like the nerdy kid in high school is like asking out, maybe this was me, is asking out like, the hottest girl in the class. Okay. And she just gives him a look like, well, the Heat were that nerdy guy and the Cavs were that girl. It was cringeworthy, unwatchable, cringeworthy. And I hate to say it's out of character for the course of all the events of the season, but we saw them without Jimmy lose by 40 at home to Utah. So this was not anomalous. Okay. It wasn't the whole season. They competed in the play-in. Some fans didn't want them to, but it wasn't like this was totally out of nowhere. Like I literally tweeted before game 4, everybody needs to be on the table. Maybe for once I was right and I sensed something. I don't know, but that's what it looked like to me. Anyway, thanks, Greg. We went long on this one. We'll have Sedano on this week. We'll have Brady, Alex evaluating the roster. Plenty of content on Off the Floor. Plenty to pick at in this episode. So come at us. Throw at us on Off the Floor. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.